I usually expect weapon updates to slow down around the point 2 version of each patch. So imagine my surprise when I saw that this version we're actually getting 4 new weapons. On the bright side, that means we have more to talk about here. Welcome back to my gameplay review and analysis video. Today, we're going to talk about 5.2's new weapons, including what they do and who can best use them. Before we begin, be sure to check out my description for disclaimers, timestamps, social media links, and music credits. If you're ready to go, then we can just jump right in. The first weapon is a new 5-star bow, Astral Vulture's Crimson Plumage. It has a 608 base attack and 66.2% crit damage as its substat. For 12 seconds after triggering a swirl reaction, attack increases by 24 to 48%. In addition, when 1 or 2+ characters are of a different elemental type from the equipping character, the user's charge attack damage is increased by 20 or 48% to 40 or 96%. And their burst damage is increased by 10 or 24% to 20 or 48%. You have a few aspects to consider when it comes to viable users. Number 1, getting the attack bonus requires the user to be Anemo, since only they can trigger swirls. Number 2, the character needs to specialize mainly in charge attack damage. Yes, the burst damage is still good, but on a lesser scale. Getting those bonuses are really easy. As long as you're not running some triple or mono team with a bow user, then you should be able to get the full damage percent bonuses. This is Chaska's signature weapon, so it's clear this should be one of, if not her best choice. She wants to be played in the swirl teams so that she can convert her Anemo bullets into RGB LEDs. This fulfills both requirements, allowing her to gain the maximum bonus the weapon provides. On to other users, another Anemo bow user might be Venti. Depending on your team or situation, you might want to build him with a standard crit build over an EM build, and this weapon is all around perfect for increasing attack, crit damage, and damage percent. While the burst damage isn't the focus of the bow, it still adds a nice buff to his main source of damage, and anyone who plays him as an on-fielder can see some nice buffs to his aim shots. Just as a little side note, you might have to invest more into ER stats, especially if Venti's the solo Anemo unit in your team. While it's a bit more of a meme build, Faruzan can also fulfill all the requirements. Her teams aren't usually mono Anemo, it's usually double Anemo with a couple extra supports, which should allow her to swirl and fulfill the team requirements. Once again though, DPS Faruzan is not her general playstyle. I highly don't recommend this if you're just playing her as a support. Because the remaining users aren't Anemo, they aren't able to fulfill the attack bonus, but they can still make use of the charge attack bonus via the team comps. Once again, as long as your team doesn't become triple or mono teams, the damage percent passive is fulfilled. Ganyu, Tighnari, and Sethos are all bow users who can make great use of this weapon. Ganyu and Tighnari in particular have decent burst damage, which does allow them to benefit from that part of the bonus. Meanwhile, Sethos doesn't actually deal burst damage, so he's only going to benefit from the charge attack buff. Linny's in a bit of a special category because there's a bit more to clarify with his synergy to the bow. Linny's designed to be a mono pyro unit, while the bow incentivizes different element teams. While it might seem anti-synergistic, the bow is actually still a great option. One of my favorite Linny teams is a Linny, Kazuha, Bennett, Zhongli team. This kind of team would fulfill the full bonus. Let's say we replace either Zhongli or Kazuha with Xiangling to make it a triple pyro comp. Yes, the bow's damage percent goes down, but doing this would actually increase Linny's A4 passive, giving an additional 20% damage bonus as a result, which mitigates most of the damage loss, so you can still run this in a triple pyro Linny comp. So depending on how you run Linny teams, this weapon might actually be really competitive with his signature. On that note, he's going to be running on the same banner with Chaska, so if you're going for the magic bow but you get Chaska's weapon instead, just know that you're not completely ruined running this weapon on Linny. Moving on, the 4-star gacha pool is also seeing a new bow. It's called Flower Wrathed Feathers. Wait, is it Wreath or Wrathed? Okay, my mistake. Flower Wreathed Feathers. It has a 510 base attack, a 41.3% attack bonus, and a 15% gliding stamina consumption reduction. When using aim shots, the damage dealt by charge attacks increases by 6 to 12% every 0.5 seconds. This can stack up to 6 times and will be removed 10 seconds after leaving aiming mode. Assuming I'm interpreting the wording of this correctly, the bow gains stacks when you're in a charging animation. So if I hold this bow shot for 3 seconds, that means I get the full amount of stacks. Once I fire, I keep the full bonus for 10 seconds, and presumably, the bonus will reset its duration if I enter aiming mode again. This is a bow that's less flexible than the 5-star, since this one only buffs charge attacks. But all the previous characters I mentioned in that niche should see the same level of viability. Ganyu and Linny are absolutely able to use this weapon since they have the standard charging times. I assume Chaska's special gun charging is still considered aiming mode, so if you don't want to waste your gems or money on the signature, this could be a cheaper alternative for her, assuming you don't have shitty luck on the 4-star gacha. Tighnari and Sethos are actually in a different situation with the bow. With their individual kits, they are able to utilize charge attack damage without the need for long charging times. Tighnari's skill allows him to heavily reduce the time and allow him to rapidly fire his shots. Meanwhile, Sethos can consume energy to also reduce his charge shot timing, or he can use his burst to deal charge attack damage through normal attack animations. Regardless, for both of them, you're not actually in aiming mode for that long, so if you're doing your charge shots, you might not be getting the full bonus until your 3rd or 4th shot. And then for Sethos in his burst state, you're doing normal attack animations, so there's no bonus at all. Yes, you can technically hold the bow a bit longer on the first shot, but that defeats the purpose of their abilities having reduced charge times in the first place. The next weapon is a 4-star gacha catalyst called Wind Riding. Why do I keep miswriting the names on these scripts? Anyway, it comes with a 454 base attack, a 61.3% energy recharge bonus, and a 15% swimming stamina consumption reduction. When using a skill, max HP is increased by 20 to 40% for 10 seconds. Then, every Hydra user in the party increases that bonus by 12 to 24%, up to a max of 2 stacks for 24 to 48%. In total, maxing out the passive equals 44 to 88% HP bonus. This can be triggered once every 15 seconds, which means at least a 5-second downtime. The conditions for users of this weapon are the following. They should be an HP scaling character, and you want to run a team centered around double Hydro comps. Based on the wording, the user themselves can be a Hydro unit already to contribute 1 stack by default, which means for them, only 1 other Hydro user is needed to max out the stacks. But this doesn't mean you have to run double Hydro. While these teams grant 88% HP at R5, you get 64% in solo Hydro, which is still a pretty large buff to any HP scaling unit. Looking at the Catalyst roster, every single Hydro user is an HP scaler, so all of them can use this weapon well. Mualani makes good use of the HP bonus, but because most of her damage is centered around her skill, she's not reliant on bursting every rotation, so you might not need the ER as much. Still, if you do want to burst every time, then this weapon sees more value on her. Neuvillette, on the other hand, is a character who wants to burst every rotation, mainly so he can generate his source water droplets. So getting enough ER on him is important. Depending on your teams, you might only have around 120 to 130 ER requirements, and if that's the case, he doesn't need the weapon for that. When you're looking into teams that are either solo Hydro or teams with low particle generation, then ER becomes a lot more relevant. The Catalyst can help mitigate most or all of the ER farming needed, and the HP buff at R5 combined with an HP Sans comes out to a total of 134.6% HP bonus. This means you can focus your attention primarily on crit-related stats, since ER and HP levels have already been met for the most part. Kokomi has that nice flexibility as a battle healer. Both her damage and healing scale on max HP, so you can ensure that regardless of your playstyle, the HP buff will be significant. Bursting every rotation for an on-field playstyle is of course a must, so the ER is important in that regard. When it comes to off-field rotations, your main goal with bursting is to maintain the jellyfish uptime, so even if you're not going for damage on her burst, you should still try to get enough ER for rotations. The main caveat with her is the uptime. I like to play her as an on-field DPS. I also like to use her burst right before the skill duration ends. So in addition to me using her as an on-field DPS, I can also extend the skill uptime. When it comes to this weapon, her A1 passive is not considered as recasting her skill. So in this example, I'm using her burst after the weapon passive ends. In order to make use of the HP bonus for a DPS Kokomi, you need to use her skill and burst in quick succession. This buffs her damage, but reduces uptime on her skill, due to not having any way to trigger the A1 passive. So, in general, stat-wise, this weapon is really good on Kokomi. Playstyle-wise, you're gonna run into restrictions on rotations and timings. Barbara sees a lot of utility with this weapon as well. Her HP scaling lets her heal her party a lot, and because she can't generate particles, building a lot of ER is required for her to burst on rotation. With that being said, her healing output is super high already, so stacking even more HP might be a bit overkill for her. Even if you're trying to run Ocean Hued Clam, her healing should be high enough to max out the damage procs every time. Since you don't need the stats as much, you might have a better time giving her a weapon with other forms of utility, such as Thrilling Tales for the attack buff or Prototype Amber for the team's energy regen bonus. Finally on this list, we have Baizhu. As mentioned before, using this weapon incentivizes the user to be in a double Hydro team, but they can still be any element. To max this out on Baizhu, he needs to have at least 2 other Hydro teammates as opposed to the rest of the roster only needing 1. But in these teams, the HP buff he gets here is massive. This buffs his healing, his shielding, and his A4's Dendro reaction buffing. There is a cap on his buffing, and there's only so much healing he can provide before it becomes overkill, so make sure you're not overdoing it with the HP stats. But on top of that, he has pretty high ER requirements, so the substat will reduce his need to find that in artifact rolls. Finally, let's talk about the new event sword, Calamity of Eshu. It has a 565 base attack and a 27.6% attack substat. While characters are protected by a shield, normal and charge attack damage is increased by 20 to 40%, and normal and charge attack crit rate is increased by 8 to 16%. This provides a nice all-around bonus for attack, damage percent, and crit stats. It focuses a lot of its buffing on normal or charge attack damage, as well as incentivizing shielder comps a bit more. For the most part, the viable users are a bit more straightforward. Chlorine and Ayato are the best options for normal attack focused characters. Meanwhile, characters like Ayaka, Kuching, and Alhaitham see some use of it due to their on-fielding role, but their power levels are either balanced out or focused primarily on skill and burst damage. So for these 3, you'll likely want weapons for all-around damage. I do think the weapon itself has a nice design in terms of gameplay mechanics. For the most part, bringing a shielder is a damage nerf to your team. You're sacrificing power and strength for the sake of defense and comfort. While this weapon likely won't completely nullify that sacrifice, I do think it'll reduce it. So even if you're running a team with defensive utility, you're still getting some offensive utility on top of that. I think it's also cool to see that the passive is an incentive to run shielders specifically. It kinda reminds me of Furina and some of the Fontaine weapons. These provide some good offensive utility under the pretense of bring a healer to use that utility. We have some weapons in the Liyue series that buff a character's attack when they're protected by a shield, but we haven't had reruns for most of these in a very long time, and I have no idea when or if Chronicled Wish is coming back to give us a shot at pulling for these weapons again. To see new weapons come out that incentivize shielding teams is a good way to push those teams into the meta. In terms of characters that can utilize a shield buff, I think it would make more sense if the synergy existed with a DPS rather than a support. Maybe the character is an inherently squishy character, so there's already the pre-existing incentive to bring a shielder, and then they have something that buffs them further when they're shielded. That would definitely be a cool way to bring some shielder teams back into the mix. Be right back. Alright, that's gonna do it for this weapon review. Overall, these provide a pretty nice buff to a variety of characters, so I can definitely see a good chunk of the roster seeing some major improvements in their weapon or build options. Charge attack bow users have a couple new options to choose from, Catalyst users see a nice addition for their ER and HP stats, and we might even see some sword users running some more shield based comps. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and subscribe to support the channel. Let me know what you think of the weapons, whether you'll pull for them, and who you'll plan to use it on. Thanks again for watching everyone, and I will see you all next time. Bye!